My name is Bruce Tarrant. I'm 57 years old, and I spent the better part of 6 years paying into a family that had already quietly removed me from the photo. Mother's Day, I was at home doing what I do on most Sundays since Dorothy passed. Making coffee I didn't need and finding small things to fix around the house. The eaves trough on the north side had been pulling away from the fascia since April. I'd been putting it off. I had my ladder out, my caulking gun, and I was doing that thing where you stay busy so you don't have to think. At 11:30, I came inside and picked up my phone off the kitchen counter. I opened Facebook. I had the account because my granddaughter Quinn, who is 5, had asked me once if I could see her drawings on there, and I'd said yes so I could see her drawings. The post loaded while I was still wearing my work gloves. A restaurant I didn't recognize. Long table, farmhouse style, exposed beams, those Edison bulbs that every place has now. My son, my daughter-in-law, both grandkids, and her mother at the head of the table with a white corsage pinned to her dress. The kind of corsage you order ahead. The kind that means someone planned this weeks in advance. The caption read, "For the woman who holds us all together. Happy Mother's Day, Mayman." I counted the people. 9. Then I counted the chairs. 9 chairs. Not one pushed back, not one empty. The number 9 had been given to a hostess. Someone had said it out loud, and 9 had not included me. I took my work gloves off and set them on the counter, very slowly, the way I used to put tools down on a client's roof when I'd found something worse than expected under the shingles. There were 2 gift bags by the front door. I'd bought my grandson Declan a real composite hockey stick. Not one of the cheap ones, the kind a kid that age actually needs if he's going to develop a proper wrist shot. And Quinn's bag had a nature journal, with pressed wildflowers already between the pages. Because she'd told me 3 weeks earlier that she wanted to learn the names of flowers, and I'd written it down on a sticky note I kept on the fridge. I left both bags by the door and sat at the kitchen table and looked at the photo for a long time. Then I opened my banking app. Before I get into what happened next, I want to say something about my daughter-in-law's mother. She's not a cruel woman. She was widowed 18 months before all this, and grief changes the geography of a family. Who fills the center, who moves to the edges. I don't think she sat down one day and decided to push me out. I think she moved in gradually, and nobody stopped her, and eventually there was no room. That's not cruelty. That's just what happens when you leave a door open and stop checking what walks through it. I went to see the kids 2 days later. My son's car wasn't in the driveway. My daughter-in-law's was. I'd texted ahead. She replied with a thumbs up, which is what she uses now when she doesn't want to use words. The babysitter answered the door and let me in. My grandson came down the hall at a run, the way he always does, sliding the last 3 feet in his socks on the hardwood. "Hey Bruce," he said, happy wide open, not a shadow of anything complicated in it. I set the gift bags down on the bench by the door. I kept my hands steady. "You don't call me Grandpa anymore," I said. He shrugged the shrug that means the thing has already been decided by adults. Mom says Grandpa is for Mamie Yvette's side. She says it gets confusing. When did she say that? He was already pulling the hockey stick out of the bag. I don't know, before Christmas. 5 months. He'd been calling me by my first name since before Christmas, and I hadn't noticed. Or I'd noticed, and called it something else in my head. My granddaughter came around the corner, dragging her blanket. She saw me, and her whole face lifted. "Grandpa Bruce!" Declan looked up. "Just Bruce, Quinn." She stopped. She looked at her brother, then at me, 5 years old, waiting to know which one of us was right. I crouched down. My knees make a sound now that they didn't make at 45, and I told her to call me whatever felt true to her, but that I wanted her to know who I was. She held up 3 fingers. "Your daddy's daddy." "That's exactly right," I said. My grandson said, "Okay, but is this the P88 curve?" and started reading the label on the stick. And that was the end of that conversation, which is exactly the right amount of conversation for an 8-year-old. I put my hand on his head for a second, told him thank you for being honest with me. He said, "You're welcome, Bruce," because he's 8, and he doesn't know yet that some sentences land differently than they're meant to. I drove her from there to my sister's house. Maureen lives 20 minutes east of me in a house she's owned since before her divorce, with a garden that gets more elaborate every year, and a dog that barks at everything including the wind. I avoid going to see her when I can, not because I don't love her, but because she says the true thing. Whatever you've been quietly calling it in your own head, Maureen takes it out and sets it on the table under the light, where you have to look at it straight. Dorothy loved her for it. It took me 30 years and a lot of evidence to come around. She poured tea neither of us drank, and I told her about the photo. Told it flat, the way I'd explain a structural problem to a client. 9 chairs, the corsage, the caption, what Declan had called me. She didn't say, "Oh, Bruce," and she didn't reach across the table. "You weren't forgotten," she said. "You were retired." I started to say that was a strong word. She went to her counter and came back with something printed on cardstock. Campaign flyer. Adam Tarrant for City Council, Roots, Community, Family. 3 words in clean white letters. And in the bottom third, a photograph taken on somebody's front porch steps. My son, my daughter-in-law, both grandkids, and her mother. His hand on Declan's shoulder, all of them in their good clothes, in the flat March light. "Where did you get this?" I asked. "It's been on the board at the coffee shop near my work for 3 weeks, and at the dry cleaners, and in my mailbox." I looked at Quinn's dress in the photo. The blue one with the white buttons, the one she'd worn to her kindergarten concert. I knew that dress. "This was taken in March," I said. "Early March," Maureen said. "Maybe late February. 3 months before Mother's Day." The brunch wasn't the decision, it was the announcement. The decision had already been made and printed and distributed to every coffee shop in the ward. Maureen sat back down. She looked at me the way she's been looking at me since we were kids. "Here's what I keep thinking about," she said. "If they'd already written you out in March, why were they still letting the money come in? I do my finances on Sunday evenings. Have since I was 32 and trying to make payroll for the first time with a crew of 4 guys and a truck that needed 2 things fixed for every one thing I fixed on it. The habit stayed long after it stopped being necessary. That Sunday I opened the banking app at the kitchen table and went to the scheduled transfer screen. I hadn't looked at it in months. There wasn't usually a reason. 4 items. $480 a month to a joint account belonging to my son and daughter-in-law. Memo line. Outback. SIM. I'd set it up 3 years ago when she'd needed a reliable vehicle, and their finances were tight. I told myself I'd do it for a year. 3 years had gone by the way those things do, when nobody mentions them. $750 a month into their RESP, the Registered Education Savings Plan for Declan and Quinn. I'd opened it the week my grandson was born, and increased the contributions when my granddaughter arrived. Between my deposits and the Canada Education Savings Grant, there was a reasonable sum in there. That money was for the kids, not their parents. $620 a month toward their home equity line, the one I'd co-signed when they bought the house, and my son's income was still irregular. They'd been carrying a balance on it 2 years longer than we'd talked about. And $300 a month into a general household fund I'd started without quite naming it at the time. Originally meant to cover school trips, hockey registration, the small gaps that come up when you're raising 2 kids in a city where nothing is cheap anymore. I'd kept sending it because stopping felt like closing a door. I did the arithmetic on the back of an envelope, $2,150 a month, almost $26,000 a year. I'd been doing it for 4 years on some items, 3 on others. The next Thursday, I drove to my accountant Ernie's office. He's been doing my taxes since the year I incorporated the roofing company, and he charges me in advance because he says I always forget to bring the check at the end. He looked at the printout for a while over his reading glasses, then he looked at me. "You know what this comes to over 5 years, rough." "I know," I said. 170, 180, depending what you count. I looked out the window at the parking lot, a pickup truck with a landscaping logo on the door. "Your retirement's 4 years behind where it should be," he said. "You know that too." I did know it. I'd pushed it back twice. Once when my son had the income gap between jobs, once when the HELOC balance stopped going down. "So what are you going to do?" Ernie asked. I told him I hadn't decided yet. That was half true. I'd been deciding since Sunday. I want to be clear about something. I don't regret a dollar of it. If I went back to any one of those moments, the afternoon she needed the car, the night he called about the mortgage, the week Declan started hockey, I'd do it again. What I needed to know was what I'd bought, and sitting at that kitchen table looking at a Facebook post and a campaign flyer that featured my entire family without me, I understood that I hadn't bought a seat at the table. I'd bought the table itself and still wasn't being asked to sit down. So I gave them a chance first. I want that on the record. Saturday evening I called my son. He picked up after 4 rings. There was noise behind him, a barbecue, voices, the sound of a summer evening when people are standing in somebody's yard with drinks. "Hey Dad, everything okay?" I told him I'd been thinking I should come by for dinner some Sunday. Catch up with him and the kids properly. A pause with something in it. "Yeah, for sure, it's just, things are pretty busy right now with the campaign. We'll find a time." "Adam," I said, "do you know what Declan calls me now?" The yard noise kept going on his end. 3 seconds of it. Someone laughed at something. "Dad, let's not do this right now, okay? I've got people here. I'm asking you a question. I'll call you this week, I promise." He hung up first. I stood in my kitchen with the phone in my hand. He hadn't asked what I meant. He hadn't said, "What are you talking about?" Or "What does he call you?" or "Who told him that?" He'd said, "Let's not do this. You only deflect a question you already know the answer to." He'd known. For months he'd known. He'd sat across from me at Declan's birthday in April and known. I set the phone face down on the counter. Then I opened the banking app and did what I'd already decided to do. I canceled the car payment, the HELOC contribution, and the household fund. 3 of the 4, top to bottom, the way you work from the ridge down on a roof, so nothing slides back on you. The rest I didn't touch. That money was Declan and Quinn's. It had never been their parents'. I wasn't going to move it just because I was angry. What I was going to do was make sure it stayed where it was meant to go. The following Monday, I drove to my credit union and spoke with an advisor and restructured the account so that I was the sole subscriber, with both grandchildren listed as beneficiaries. The money was still going in. The kids were still getting the government grant, but no withdrawal could happen without my signature. Then I wrote my son a letter on a notepad and mailed it, because a text can be ignored at a red light and an email can be screenshotted and sent around in 30 seconds, and I didn't want either of those things. 4 sentences. I worked on them for 2 days. I told him the car payments had stopped. The HELOC contributions had stopped. The household fund had stopped. I told him the rest was still running. Both kids were still the beneficiaries, and he could see the statements anytime he asked. And I told him, "I'm still your children's grandfather. I've just stopped being your silent underwriter." The letter arrived Wednesday. My phone didn't ring for 19 days. People ask what those 3 weeks were like. Honestly, they were the clearest I'd felt since before Dorothy got sick, and that clarity made me feel strange about myself. I took a job I'd been putting off. Full roof replacement on a commercial building east of the city, the kind of work I used to do before I sold my share of the business. I hired 3 guys through my old foreman and worked alongside them for 12 days. I came home tired in a clean way. I rebuilt the back fence that had been leaning since the previous autumn. I called my mother, which I don't do enough. Every night around 9 I checked my phone. Nothing, not a call, not a text. I told myself that was information, not injury. Day 19, I made the mistake of opening Facebook. My son had posted a campaign video. Handheld, him walking through the neighborhood talking to camera about infrastructure and community investment. In the background of one shot, through a window of a house they'd stopped in front of, I could see a kitchen I recognized as my daughter-in-law's mother's house. The comments were full of people saying he seemed like a genuine family man. I understood, watching it, that he genuinely believed that about himself. That's not cynicism. That's just what happens when the story you tell yourself long enough stops feeling like a story. My daughter-in-law's mother called me on a Thursday, first time in 4 years. I knew the number because Dorothy had put it in my phone in the early days, when the kids were small, and we were all figuring out how to share the same grandchildren without bumping into each other. She was gracious. She's always been gracious. There is not a sharp edge on that woman. She moves through rooms the way a warm front moves. You don't notice the pressure changing until the weather has already shifted. She talked about family for a while, about the importance of showing up for the children, of letting them see the adults in their lives behave well. She used the word gracious twice. Then she got to it. "Adam's campaign launch barbecue is Saturday afternoon at the house. We'd love to have you there, Bruce." I looked out my back window at the fence I'd just fixed. "I'd be glad to come," I said. genuine relief in her voice. That's the thing about people like her, the relief is real. She was solving a problem. She's always solving problems. That's not a criticism. It just means that once you understand what problem you are in someone's mind, you understand every conversation you've ever had with them. I said thank you. I hung up, and I understood what that invitation was. In 2 days, there would be 40-50 people in a backyard, and a man who doesn't answer his phone becomes a question someone at that party will ask out loud. She was setting the table. She just didn't know I had my own reason to sit at it. Saturday, I ironed the gray shirt Dorothy bought me at the outlet mall in Burlington for her colleague's retirement dinner. She'd made me try it on in the store. Said the collar sat right. I've worn it maybe 6 times. The yard was full when I arrived. 40-something people, paper tablecloths, a gas barbecue going, kids running between adult legs. The kind of summer afternoon my son had always been good at organizing. He got that from his mother. He saw me when I came through the gate. Something moved across his face. He crossed the yard and shook my hand. Dad, glad you made it. He meant it. That was the complicated part. He was genuinely glad to see me, after 19 days of silence. Those two things can both be true in a person, and the fact that they can be is what makes this kind of family so hard to explain to people who've never been inside one. I got a plate of food and found a spot near the back fence. Declan was playing with 3 other boys his age. Quinn was sitting with her other grandmother on a blanket doing something with craft supplies. She waved at me twice and called out, "Hi, Grandpa Bruce," and nobody corrected her, and I noticed that too. At around 4 o'clock, my son picked up a portable microphone and called for people's attention. He talked about the neighborhood, about the changes he wanted to make, practical things people at a backyard barbecue could understand and get behind. He was good at it. Dorothy used to say he got her gift for rooms. Then he turned personal. He talked about what had shaped him, his work ethic, his commitment to showing up, the values that drove him to want to serve his community. I didn't get here alone, he said. I got here because of the people who showed me what family actually means, who showed me that it means being present, being constant, being the one who keeps the table together. He looked toward my daughter-in-law's mother. To you, he said, for everything you've done for our family, for the kids, for Simone, for me, we wouldn't be standing here without you. People clapped, genuine warmth in it. He didn't look at me. I set my plate down on the table behind me. I waited until the clapping had settled, and the crowd was still arranging itself, and I raised my hand. Adam, I said, can I borrow the microphone for a moment? 40-some people looked at me. Sure, he said, because in front of 45 people there was no other answer. The microphone popped a little when I took it. Someone chuckled. Then it went quiet in that particular way a room does, when it knows something is happening that nobody planned for. I'm not a man who speaks in public. I've given 1 toast at a wedding, 2 eulogies, and 1 presentation to a municipal permits office about drainage requirements. I know my range. My name is Bruce Tarrant, I said, my voice held. I'm Adam's father, and I'm Declan and Quinn's grandfather on their dad's side. A chair scraped somewhere, nobody else moved. Adam's right that family means showing up. I've been showing up for 6 years. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't look at his mother-in-law. For 6 years, I've made monthly contributions to your grandchildren's education accounts. I've covered a portion of your mortgage line when you needed it. I paid for 3 years of your wife's vehicle. I did it quietly, the way I do most things. Last month, I stopped most of it. I turned toward my son. I didn't stop because of a brunch I wasn't invited to. I stopped because I walked by the coffee shop on Wilson Street and saw a campaign flyer with my entire family on it, taken in March, and I wasn't anywhere in it. And I realized the brunch wasn't the decision. It was just the last time the math worked out the same way. Nobody was looking at their phones. The education account is still running. That one belongs to the kids, not the adults, and I'm going to keep putting money in until they're old enough to use it. I looked at my son one more time. I'm not here to embarrass anyone. I just needed to be in the room once when this got said out loud. I put the microphone down on the table and sat down. 4 seconds. I counted them because counting is what I do. Then a woman near the food table started clapping. I found out later she'd known Dorothy, had been her friend from the hospital fundraising committee, and then the couple beside her, and then most of the yard. Not wild, not a standing ovation. The sound of people quietly deciding something and expressing it the only way available to them at a Saturday afternoon barbecue. My daughter-in-law's mother did not clap. She looked at her hands on the table. My son had an expression I didn't know how to read. My daughter-in-law had both her hands wrapped around a water glass, very still. I stayed long enough not to make a scene of leaving. Then I said my goodbyes to the people near me, and I went. He caught up with me at my truck. "You humiliated me in front of everyone I know, Dad." No tears. Good, that meant the real conversation was finally happening. "I said what's true," I said. "If the true part is humiliating, that's not something I did to you." He stood there with his arms crossed. He looked very young and very tired, and very much like his mother at 34, which is something I'll carry for the rest of my life. "I should have called," he said. "After you sent the letter, I should have called the same day." I waited. I didn't know what to say. "You could have said anything. I would have listened." He rubbed the back of his neck. I've watched him do that since he was 9 years old and caught in something he couldn't explain his way out of. "She told me you found big gatherings overwhelming since Mom died. That you preferred smaller things." I believed her. "She told you that in March," I said. "Yeah." "Same month as the flyer." He looked at the driveway. "Yeah." We stood there for a while on either side of something that needed to be said slowly or not at all. "Dad," he said finally, "did she know? About the money?" "She knew about the rest, but I assumed the rest. You were the one who called me when you needed those things." I never told her what I'd asked you for. He said it like a man who has been sitting with a fact and has only just understood what it means. "I know," I said. He stood there another moment. "Are you going to be okay?" he asked. I told him I already was. The things that happened afterward don't all need telling in order. My son called me the following Wednesday. Clear morning. No background noise. We talked for 40 minutes, which is longer than we'd talked in a year. He withdrew from the council race the week after the barbecue. He told people it was a timing issue with work, which is the kind of explanation you give when the real one takes more than 2 sentences, and you're not ready to give it yet. My daughter-in-law came to my house on a Saturday without the kids. She sat across my kitchen table and cried. Some of it was about me. Some of it was about things I hadn't known. There was a gap between what my son knew she was doing and what she knew he was doing that turned out to be significant once they started actually comparing notes. I don't know all of it, and I don't need to. She told me, at the end, that she was the one who'd told Declan to call me by my first name. It had started as something her mother had said at Sunday dinners. Small corrections when Declan got the grandfathers confused, and she'd picked it up because it was easier than pushing back every week. And then one day it had just become the rule. I asked her one question, and I put it plainly. She told me the truth. I put a page on the table between us, 4 things. 1. The rest stays in my name. Contributions continue. Both kids are beneficiaries. She can call the credit union anytime and they'll read her the balance. 2. I take the grandkids every other Saturday. Not when it's convenient for everyone's schedule. Every other Saturday, rain or shine, starting the Saturday after next. 3. I'm on the list for family events, before the reservation is made, not after. 4. The financial support is done, not paused, not renegotiated. Done. If they hit a real wall, they're welcome to call me and we'll figure something out together. But the automatic transfers are finished. She read the page twice. That's fair, she said. It's not generous, I said. It's just true. Those are different things. I spent 6 years getting them confused. She took the page and put it in her bag. Before she left, she told me my son was talking to someone, a counselor in the city, someone they didn't know through the usual social circles. She didn't say more than that. I didn't ask. There are doors you let people walk through at their own speed. That was 11 months ago. A year does a lot of quiet work. My son and his wife are still together. They are working on something, which is different from pretending nothing happened. I know the difference because I've seen both. My daughter-in-law's mother and I don't speak at family events. We nod. We sit at different ends of tables. It's a workable arrangement, and I've made my peace with it. Not every relationship can be repaired, and I've stopped needing it to be. Ernie told me in April that if I keep my current pace, I can retire properly in 3 years instead of 7. I'm thinking about it. There's a fishing trip booked in October, up past Huntsville, first week of the season, the first one I've done since Dorothy was alive. I'd forgotten I used to like it. The rest crossed $60,000 in June. Both kids are still the beneficiaries. I still put $300 per child in every month. I've never mentioned the balance to my son or daughter-in-law. They can call the branch anytime they want. My grandson calls me Grandpa. He has never once acknowledged that he ever called me anything else. 8-year-olds operate with an efficiency of memory that I've come to find admirable. My granddaughter, who just turned 6, tells strangers in grocery stores that she has 2 grandpas and they're different grandpas, and both of them are hers. She says it with the complete authority of someone who has recently learned a complicated fact and wants the world to know she has it sorted. Father's Day came around again this year. I'll be honest about what I did, because I think the honest version matters more than the version where I've already been transformed into someone I'm not. I woke up early and drove to Canadian Tire and bought hardware for a job I had no deadline on, and I came home and started sorting through it in the garage, because that's what I do on Sunday mornings when I don't know what else to do with myself. I'd been at it about 2 hours when my phone rang. My son. Dad, we're doing lunch here. Maureen's coming, and Declan's been asking about you since yesterday. I know it's short notice, but there's a spot if you want it. I set down the connector I was holding. I said I'd be there in half an hour. I made it in 20 minutes. The table wasn't fancy. Paper plates, a casserole Maureen brought, because she always brings the casserole whether anyone asks or not, lemonade, the screen door off the kitchen banging every time the wind came through. My grandson talked at me for 15 straight minutes about his hockey tryout. My granddaughter climbed onto my lap before the food was even on the table and stayed there through most of the meal. At one point, my daughter-in-law reached for her phone and then stopped and set it face down on the sideboard and said, "No, let's just eat." And nobody argued. There was no card, there was no corsage, nobody took a photograph. At the end of the meal, my son stood up to clear the plates and paused behind my chair and put his hand briefly on my shoulder, the way men do when they have more to say than they know how to say yet. My chair was at the end of the table nearest the kitchen door, the spot nobody fights over, the one where you can get up and refill everyone's drinks without making anyone move. Dorothy used to sit there. I sat there for 31 years, watching her get up to take care of everybody. There was no name card on it, no corsage, no ceremony. But I'd been told there was a spot. Before I walked in, someone had counted, and when they counted, I was in the number. Here's what I've come to understand at 57, and I'll leave you with it. People who've been quiet too long get mistaken for people who don't need anything. I made myself easy to overlook for 6 years, because I'd decided that asking for a seat was the same as being a burden, and being a burden was the one thing I refused to be. But silence doesn't read as strength, it reads as permission, and they'd been taking my quiet for permission the whole time. If nobody's writing your name down before you walk in, you're allowed to stop setting the table for everyone else. But you're also allowed to say something, out loud, in a room, with your voice holding. That's the part I learned too late, and would have paid any price to know sooner.